I was not raised in the church, and I want to kind of unpack that a little bit for you and give you some insight as to why I'm going to be talking about the things I'm going to be talking about this week and why they're so important to me. And the thing is I think for most of us, it begins in the eyes. This lesson I entitled "I'm a Statistic" because when you statistically look at members of the church, predominantly you're going to have anywhere between 60 and 80% of people that have grown up in it. There are obviously cases for evangelism where evangelism has truly worked. But one of the things that I've heard so much in the 23 years that I've been a Christian is I'll hear statements like, "Well, that guy is a good candidate for the gospel." You ever heard that? I don't even know what that means, but I've said it even myself. I've said it myself where you look at someone and you say, "Well, this guy's a good candidate for the gospel." Well, what that means then necessarily is that someone else isn't. And that's the concerning thing. That's the thing because it begins in the eyes for so many of us. This is a quote that I had come across early in becoming a Christian that got me thinking this way. Because becoming a Christian at 28 years old, I didn't have a lot of tradition. I had a whole different worldview and things that I had experienced, and so you know to look at someone and say, "Well, they're a good candidate for the gospel." In my mind, everybody is a good candidate for the gospel. Who's not a good candidate for the gospel? And this quote really kind of speaks to that. J. Oswald Sanders says, "Eyes that look are common, eyes that see are rare." And so that got me thinking about, statistically speaking, why the church kind of is the way it is. While we have, anywhere between, 60 and 70% members that are second and third generation Christians, and not as many first generation Christians. And it's because of this. It's because of this idea of it beginning in the eyes and the way that we look at people and the way we view people. And so this quote has been very important to me in not only my walk as a Christian, but as I have moved into the role of evangelist. And there's several other quotes that I've lived by for the last 20 some odd years in becoming a Christian, and I want to share at least one more of those this morning. But I want to fill you in on some of the backstory. Some of the backstory would be helpful. The title of the sermon is "I'm a Statistic," and so by all accounts, what that means is I am a statistic. If you read statistics about certain aspects of country as a whole that we live in, there are several that ring true, especially in regards to evangelism and who is and who isn't a good candidate. And so, a few statistics that I've gathered from Gallup are in regards to that statement. And so I'm just going to read some of these off. I didn't want to put them on a slide because they're really long, and I just thought I would sort of surmise them for you. But the first one is that half of all American children will witness the breakup of a parent's marriage. We know that to be true. The divorce rate in America is what it is, right? And there are a lot of reasons for that, and that could be a whole nother series of lessons on its own. The truth is we know that the divorce rate in America is well over 50%. And so nearly half, or more than half now, of all American children will witness the breakup of a parent's marriage. 40% of children growing up in America today are being raised without fathers. Paul and I were talking a little about that this morning, about this whole concept of toxic masculinity and what that looks like, and how men are growing up more violent now than maybe they have been in past generations. But by and large, it's they're growing up without fathers in the home, and that might be the primary reason for that. Studies in the early 1980s showed that children in repeat divorces earn lower grades. It's not uncommon in America to see people that are on their third and fourth marriages. Well, in those situations, the children growing up in repeat divorces earning lower grades. And so there's something about that. Teenagers in single parent families and in blended families are 3 times more likely to need psychological help. You know that's true. You don't have to be on social media very long to see how many people talk about being in therapy, right? Here's the one that really got me. Compared to children from homes disrupted by death, now listen to me. Compared to children from homes disrupted by death, children from divorced homes have more psychological problems. This is the statement that really pulled me in. The death of a parent is less devastating to a child than divorce. Think about that. The death of a parent is less devastating than a divorce for a child. Because with a death, I guess there's finality and they can grieve and they can move on. But when there's divorce, you still have both parents, don't you? And you still have to choose and you still have to for lack of a better term, manipulate the situation to accommodate whatever situation you're in. Whether when you're with the father and he wants to talk about the mother, or when you're with the mother and she wants to talk about the father, the kids are the ones that pay the price in those things. And so it's less damaging for a child to have a parent die than to have them divorce. Most victims of child molestation come from single parent households. Whether it's because they're put into situations where they ordinarily wouldn't be if there were two parents in the home, who knows? But that's a real statistic. That's from the Los Angeles Times, September 2015. A child in a female-headed home is 10 times more likely to be beaten or murdered. This again comes from the Los Angeles County area, and so you know that to be true. Just watch the news long enough. 70% of long-term prison inmates grew up in broken homes. Children of divorce, particularly boys, tend to be more aggressive toward others than those children whose parents did not divorce. And children of divorced parents are roughly 2 times more likely to drop out of school than their peers. All these have been true for me, except the dropping out of school part. My grandmother convinced me to stay, make it through high school, and so I did it for her. But I wanted to quit so bad. You understand? There's a whole story behind that I'm going to get into. But I wanted to leave so bad, and I had good reason to. But she convinced me to stay, and I made it through. I had a scholarship to go to the University of Georgia, but who wants to go to the University of Georgia? That was for you. But I turned it down. But here's the statistic that rings truest for me and is most alarming. 72% of male children from divorce homes where abuse, physical or mental, is present fall into atheism. 72% of male children where abuse is present from divorced homes fall into atheism. And if you think about it, it makes sense, doesn't it? If your earthly father is supposed to be the model of what God set up in the home, but your earthly father is absent, or your earthly father is abusive, or your earthly father is just a mess. What kind of faith are you going to put into an supposedly all loving, all knowing father? Well, probably not as much. And I know that because that rings true for me too. I also grew up as an atheist. Religion wasn't something that was practiced in our home, so I didn't really have an affiliation one way or the other. But as I got older and I got a little more jaded by my circumstances, the things that I was dealing with, atheism became very attractive to me because my dad was a loser in my eyes when I was 18. And so I was like, well, if my dad can't get it right, surely this all loving, all knowing father must not exist because my representation of it here was a failure. The point is this: Satan doesn't wait to come for our kids. I know we talk a lot about the age of accountability, but what is that even? Satan doesn't wait till you're 13. He doesn't wait till you're 18. Satan came for me at 5 years old. The first time I encountered abuse, not from my father, but from another family member. I was 5. Satan didn't wait for me to be of some accountable age. At 5 years old, I got introduced to the darkness that's a reality for many people. And when Jesus told Peter that Satan wants to sift you like wheat, that's exactly what Satan does. Satan doesn't wait for our kids to grow up to sift them like wheat. And so, to qualify my statement that evangelism is involved in the eyes, It's often what we fail to see or refuse to see in others. We look at people every day. We encounter people at the grocery store. We encounter people at work, and we don't really see them. Because if those statistics are true, then half the people that you meet are dealing with something along those lines. Half the people that you encounter every day have had some sort of abuse, come from a broken home. Maybe you're leaning towards atheism. They've lost faith in men. Half the people that we meet. And we just don't see it or we don't want to see it. Again, eyes that look are common, but eyes that see are rare. We have to develop eyes that see. We have to look beyond someone. And so when someone says, well, this guy's a good candidate for the gospel, what they're seeing is someone who looks like them. That's what that usually means. When I see someone who looks like me, it makes me comfortable. So, yes, you're someone I want to share the gospel with. But what happens when you look at someone maybe who doesn't look like you? Maybe they're a little scary. Maybe they look like they're from a biker gang, or maybe they look like they've been in prison, or maybe they look like this guy. Does this guy look like a good candidate for the gospel? Not this guy. He's not going to listen. He's not going to care. He's too involved in his rock band, and he's too involved in drinking and drugs and his women. He's not interested in the gospel. So no, I'm not going to waste my time on this guy. This guy's not a good candidate for the gospel. I mean, who wants to share the gospel with a guy like this? This guy failed the ninth grade because he got suspended 9 times for fighting in the ninth grade. This guy was drinking and smoking pot and very sexually promiscuous at 14. And by 17, this guy was already experimenting with drugs of every flavor, cocaine, methamphetamines, well on his way to addiction. He was the life of the party, though. He was the front man in a touring rock band by his senior year and very well on his way to agnosticism and atheism. And so, of course, yeah, this guy is me. This is me when I'm 18 years old. This is where I was. And that's an angry young man who had grown up in broken home. By all accounts, those statistics that we were talking about, where abuse was present, father was absent, rough neighborhood, all those things. Why would this guy lean towards God? Why would this guy lean into giving up the only things that really made him feel alive because he was so dead inside? I think that's what we have to realize sometimes when we're going into the world. We don't want to talk to people that look like this because of the things we're asking them to give up. We're asking them to give up alcohol. We're asking them to give up drugs. We're asking them to give up their relationships that aren't godly. But that's all they've got. Why would they want to do that? And so we're like, no, that's too hard. I'm not talking to that guy. Well, look harder. Look deeper. There is behind this look and behind this behavior a young man who was hurting and desperately seeking release, desperately seeking peace, seeking answers. A young man who desperately wanted to believe. The scary part of that is I would have gone to church. I get asked sometimes. I'm heavily involved with Florida college camps in Alabama. And I get asked a lot by younger kids when they, get to know me a little bit. And they'll say, Mr. Keith, why did you wait till you were 28 to become a Christian? Why did you wait till you were 28 to go to church? And the real answer, nobody invited me. They looked at me and they said, not bring that guy. Who's going to sit by that guy at church? He's not going to wear a suit. He's not going to look the part. And so I tell kids that. Why did you wait? Because nobody invited me. My second year as a camp counselor, I'm in the cabin welcoming parents, bringing in their sons that I'm going to be in charge of that week. And I'm not paying attention, and I look up, and there's a woman standing there with her son, dropping her son off to me, that I had gone to high school with. That she knew this guy. And she looks at me and I look at her and she's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "What are you doing here?" She said, "Well, I'm dropping my son off at camp." She goes, "I didn't know you were a Christian." And I was like, "I didn't know you were either." But she had grown up in the church. She was a member of the church. She was one of those 60 to 80% that grow up in the church and are second and third generation Christians. I never knew that. And to be fair, would she have invited me to church? Probably not. I don't say that to be rude or to place some sort of false guilt or responsibility on her. But she had grown up in the church with people that would soon become my family too. The congregation she attended in Mableton, Georgia, was also where my mother in law would take her 6 kids to worship as well. And so I would have gone if someone would have invited me. I was desperately looking for something. The problem was is that when you're desperately looking for something, you just grab the first thing that comes your way. Life creates a vacuum, and when there's something missing, something else will fill that, right? And I was missing a lot, and so the world was filling me up with all of its stuff. But I was looking for something. But what he didn't count on, Satan that is, what Satan didn't count on was me meeting this beautiful woman, to see past this guy and to see what might be there. My wife was my first introduction to anything related to the church. Like I said, she had grown up going. Now, she hadn't become a Christian either. When we met, she wasn't behaving either, but there was a sense of morality in her that was completely foreign to me and very, very attractive because of that. Besides from my wife being a beautiful woman, there was an inner beauty that I had never come across because by the time I met her, I was 21 years old, about to turn 22. I had been in my rock band since I was 17. We had toured the country by the time I was 21. By the time I was 21, I've been in every state in the continental US. If not playing there, I was driving through there. And so we had seen the whole country. I had lived like 10 lives in those 4 years. And so when I met my wife, I was pretty messed up, but there was there was there was a discipline that she had that I just didn't understand. She told me no. No one ever told me no. And this woman will look me right in the eye and say no. And I was like, what is that about? But I wanted to know. I wanted to know what that's about. Now, again, she hadn't become a Christian, but there was instilled in her a sense of morality that she learned growing up attending services at the Mableton Church of Christ. You know, and so because I was atheist or agnostic, I'm never really sure exactly what I was. It was maybe more atheism out of convenience that if I don't believe in your God, then his rules don't apply to me. Sort of that mentality. But there was this still the sense of this idea that you can't really know, no one really knows. So what's the point? And honestly, I had friends that I had grown up with in high school that were total hypocrites. Like they were the standard church going people that would come to my parties or come to my shows that my band would play on Friday and Saturday night, and then condemn me Monday morning for being there, which didn't make any sense to me. But this woman was kind and she was good and she pushed me, motivated me to be better. And so there was just a morality that she possessed that was completely foreign again. When she told me that she had come from a religious family, I didn't bat an eyelash because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I know all about you religious people. I can handle this situation. And so she brings me to meet her family, and none of them were impressed, clearly, especially her mom. She was not impressed with me. But they weren't mean to me. I mean, her mom was. Her mom was mean to me. But what mom wouldn't be mean to this guy? What do you want with my daughter? Why are you here? Well, we date, we get serious, we get engaged. And while I'm still in my band, I'm still using drugs. I'm still keeping it hidden from her. I won her family over at this point. I learned that if I could make her mom laugh, then I had her. And I found myself to be pretty funny when it came to making her mom laugh. But my wife is no dummy. And so she noticed little things, things that, though I hadn't confessed a lack of faith to her, I certainly didn't live like I have one. And we stayed the course, and it was rocky at times. But we got married, and 2 years later, we found out we were expecting a baby girl. This was also a game changer. So the first game changer for me was my wife. She was one of the first of 5 evangelists that entered my life. Because again, though she wasn't a Christian at the time, she lived very much like one in a lot of ways, not in every way, but in a lot of ways. And so my wife was my first introduction to true Christianity, not the hypocrisy that I'd grown up seeing, but true Christianity. And then the second one would be my daughter. Because my wife had shown me the possibility of a person living by some sense of a godly principle or a morality. My daughter Kaya being born showed me the possibility of an all powerful God because I was there for the birth and I got to witness life happen. And if you've never witnessed that, which by that point in my life, I'd never seen anything like that, but it affected me. And when I held her for the first time, something woke up in me because I was like, wow, this is this is incredible. And I thought about how she was created. She was created from an act of love. And it started to click inside me. It'd been another 2 years before I really acted on it. But during that 2 year period, I started to understand love. I thought I knew what love was, but I didn't. But my daughter being born helped me understand what love really is and what sacrifice really is. That there's nothing that I wouldn't do for this baby. And I started understanding then how an all loving father just might die for his creation. Because I knew that I certainly would when I held my daughter. What a father's love really looked like. That I would give my life to save hers, no question. And so the idea of a godly father then started making sense. The idea of a heavenly father was possible, that someone maybe does love me that way. And I just maybe had been blind to it. But my addiction had begun to spiral. Lies that I told had gotten bigger, harder to remember. Finally, it all came to a head, and the whole thing came crashing down on me, and it was all my doing. And Kelly called me, and she said, I know everything. I am taking Kaya, and we're leaving. Call me when you're ready to be who you need to be. So what did I do? I called the drug dealer. I got more drugs. And just before I could use them, there's a knock on my door, and it's my brother-in-law, Mark. Now you have to understand, Mark was the bane of my existence at this point in my life because he was the golden standard in my wife's eyes. My wife met Mark, my brother-in-law, when she was 8. My wife's older sister, Denise, was 7 years older than my wife. And so, they started dating when they're 15 and 14 years old, and my wife's an 8-year-old. So she's known Mark her whole life. And so Mark is the benchmark of everything that a man ought to be and everything that I was not. And so I hated Mark. I love Mark very much now. But at that time, I didn't want to hear Mark, Mark, Mark. I didn't want to hear about Mark. Here he is at my door. What do you want, Mark? He goes, I want to talk to you. And so we sit down. And he says, what are you doing? I really don't know, Mark. I don't even know how to answer that question. And I just started talking. And for 3 hours, he let me tell him every ugly truth about me, everything that I'd done. And about 3/4 of the way through the conversation, I had noticed Mark is angry. Now, well, I grew up in the streets. I'm pretty sure I could take Mark in an ordinary circumstance. That's what it was coming to. But at that moment, Mark's looking at me with something that I did not have, and that's determination. And I was like, oh man, he really wants to hurt me because I've taken, for all intents and purposes, his little sister, and I've just broken her. And instead of taking me outside and beating me for all that I'm worth, Mark says, you ready to try something else? I'm like, Mark, you know I don't believe in God. He goes, yeah, dude, but he believes in you, I'm pretty sure. You've lived your way 28 years. You've made a total mess. You got nothing left to lose. Look, come to church with me tomorrow night. Maybe I can get Kelly to meet you there. And so I went. And so Mark Bowman was the third person that influenced me to consider becoming a Christian. Because I'm sitting there in a position of what can be classified as nothing else than violence against his little sister. Not by blood, but by relation. And instead of giving me what I deserve, he offers me something else. He offers me something better. And that's a model, right? We see that in the scriptures. And so I agree to go because I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe Kelly will meet me there and I can get her back home and we can get back to normal. And so I agreed to go. And needless to say, I was nervous. I didn't look right, right? In my mind, this is not what people who go to church look like. These are not good candidates for the gospel. Again, the eyes. I knew what I'd based in high school, and I just knew in my bones that I'm going to walk in, and everyone in that building is going to judge me. They're going to think they know something about me, and they don't. But here's the thing: I don't remember the songs they sang. I don't remember the invitation talk that was given. I do remember the Bible class though. They were in Revelation 19, and I remember thinking, "What in the world? What have I walked into?" But what I remember the most is that they didn't see this. They saw me. They really saw me. They didn't just look at me, they saw me. They had eyes that saw me. They didn't care where I come from. They didn't care what I had done. They only cared that I was there. And that if it was the last time they ever saw me, they were going to make sure that I knew that in that moment, when I had been there in the Lord's church, that I was loved. And if I never came back, I would know that. So as we're leaving, a very tall, big man named Brownie stopped me in the foyer. And he, though friendly, also looked very determined. And he comes up to me in the foyer and he says, "Hey, you ever study your Bible?" It's the first thing he said to me. Didn't introduce himself. He didn't say, "Hey, I'm Brownlee Reeves." I called him Brownie though. His name's Brownlee, but everybody called him Brownie. He comes up and says, "Do you ever study your Bible?" And I'm like, "No, sir. I don't have one." He said, "No problem. I'll bring you one. How about tomorrow night?" He did not let me out of that foyer without committing to a study. Now, in my mind, I'm just thinking, what's going to get Kelly home again? And he doesn't have to know what's going on with us. I just want to get my wife home. So yeah, let's study. So he sets the study up. He comes over, brings me a Bible, and immediately I start hitting him with all my atheist mic drop questions that I'm going to stump this man because he doesn't know how smart I am. And this goes on for 3 weeks. He comes over every Monday night, and I just ask him all my dumb questions. And every single time, he never said they were dumb questions, but he would take his Bible, he would open it up to a passage, he would turn it around and slide it across the table and make me read it. He would make me read the answer to my question. And so we studied, and he let me talk, and he let me ask all these dumb questions that I had. And I say they're dumb because I wasn't really wanting to know something. I was trying to stump him, and I couldn't because he never answered from his own personal thoughts. He always answered me with scripture. And so after a few weeks of this, even when we try to cancel, The study, Brownie would show up. And it all began to make a little more sense. And finally, after about a month, Kelly and I said, you know what? This is something we need to do. This does make sense. I've never been shown this. I've never been taught this. No one's ever told me that this is what it really is. So after a month, Kelly and I were baptized. And another quote that I lived by was a quote by the author Anais Nin. Now I don't recommend her or endorse her whole body of work, but this one quote has stuck with me since that moment. That the day came when the desire to stay the same was more painful than the risk to change. Meaning that the circumstances I was in, it was going to be more painful for me to stay that way than to risk everything and try something else. And that quote has stayed with me and has meant something to me my whole life. And so the next two evangelists in my life were first the Mountain View Church of Christ because of how they welcomed me in and made me feel loved. And then the last one was Brownie Reeves. He was the one that finally delivered to me the truth. But that's the point that I'm trying to make here. Is that there is no one evangelist in any church. Everybody here can be an evangelist. My wife didn't even know she was showing me something, but the way that she lived and the integrity that she had in her character showed me something. My daughter, how would that do anything? Well, when I see the power of life and creation, it's not some random sequence of events, but there's truly a design. Showed me something. My brother-in-law, who didn't owe me a thing for what I had done, gave me an invitation to come to church. And then when I got there, that church, that body of people, didn't look at me and see what was on the outside. They saw somebody who needed the gospel, somebody who truly was a good candidate for the gospel. Not because I looked right, because I was there. That's all it took was I showed up. And then Brownlee Reeves taught me the truth and showed me the better way. And comfort and the peace and a clear conscience and love and all of it was finally coming into view. And the road to discipleship then was just as long and rocky as the redemption was. And that's another lesson for another time. And there's obviously a lot more details to the story that I could fit into a week-long series, but I've got this window of time this morning. There were several people in my life that were evangelists. James Tackett was one of them. Holly's brother. Still my best friend to this day. And so when I hear someone say, well, I'm just not comfortable speaking to people. Okay. You have a table? Can you make a sandwich? Then invite somebody over for lunch and have Paul come talk to them. Have Paul come teach them. Hospitality is vital to evangelism. Not everybody has to be a teacher or a speaker. You can just provide the place. But here's the thing, again, the people we run into in everyday life, we have to realize that over 60% of those people are dealing with something and they are all good candidates for the gospel. So maybe you're not comfortable teaching. Okay, invite them over, make them a sandwich, and let Paul come teach them. Be a part of the problem or the solution, not the problem. Because evangelism without hospitality falls flat. Because when we became Christians and the Mountain View Church of Christ pulled us in, man, we were with somebody every night. Friday nights, we were at somebody's house for dinner and a study, or dinner and study, dinner and games, dinner and singing, something. We were always eating, I know that. Saturday night, same thing. Or Saturday, we'd have a potluck at someone's house. Then we were at church on Sunday, all three services. And then there was a study after for young married couples, which Kelly and I really needed. Monday nights, we studied with Brownlee. Tuesday night, we had soccer. Wednesday night, we're back at church. Thursday night, we had soccer. And then Friday night, it started all over again. We were with the church all the time, which was great because I quit my band and my wife quit her bartending job. And we walked away from a whole life of people that we thought were our friends, not knowing what we were going to walk into, that people that became family. you have to understand how important the church is. That it wasn't just Brownlee Reeves, the supported evangelist, that taught me. It was that whole body of people. And here's the thing. You don't even have to talk. You don't have to use your own words if you do talk. God has given us all that we need to say already. And like Brownlee, you can just turn the page, push the Bible across the table, and have someone read it themselves. Here's what I mean. Look at Luke 24 for a second. I just want to break down the ultimate example of evangelism that Jesus gives us on the very first day that he is resurrected from the dead. We know that it's the first day of the week. Because in Luke 24, verse 1, it says, now on the first day of the week, early dawn, they came to the tomb bringing spices which they had prepared. And so we know what happens there. They realize that the tomb is empty. And they rush back to go tell the disciples, hey, he's not there. And then in verse 13, something happens. It says, and behold, two of them were going on that same day to a village named Emmaus, which was about 60 stadia from Jerusalem. And they were conversing with each other about all the things that had happened. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself approached and was going with them. But their eyes, again, the eyes, prevented them from recognizing him. And they said, what are these words that you're discussing with one another as you're walking? And they stood still, looking sad. And one of them, named Cleopas, answered him and said, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things which have happened here in these days? And he said to them, what things? And they said to him, the things about Jesus, the Nazarene, the mighty prophet in deed and in word and in the sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it's the third day since these things happened. But some women from among us astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning. And they didn't find his body in the tomb, and they came and told what they had seen, this vision of angels who said that he was alive. And some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it exactly as the women had said. But him they did not see. And he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken, was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and then enter into his glory? Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them things concerning himself in all the scriptures. And they approached the village where they were going, and he acted as though he was going further, but they urged him strongly, saying, stay with us, for it's toward evening, and the day is nearly over. So he went on to stay with them, and it happened that he reclined at the table with them. He took bread, blessed it, and breaking it, giving it to them, their eyes were opened. Here it is with the eyes again. Their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished in their sight. And they said to one another, did our hearts not burn within us while he was speaking to us on the road, and while he was opening the scriptures to us? They stood up at that hour, they returned to Jerusalem, and found and gathered together the 11 and those with them, who were saying, the Lord has really risen, and appeared to Simon. And they were relating their experience on the road and how he was recognized in the breaking of bread. Note here, Jesus gives us the perfect model for what evangelism looks like. And it's the same model that was given to me. And everybody here can practice this model. Because the first thing that they did was that Jesus cared. He heard them talking. He could see that they were upset. He's really using his eyes that see, not just eyes that look. Jesus didn't look and say, well, these guys aren't good candidates for my gospel. He saw them and he drew near. Jesus cared. Everybody here can care about someone else. The second thing that he did was he asked questions. What are you guys talking about? Well, these things, where have you been? And what things? Jesus asked questions. He inquired. What is it that's bothering you? Tell me. And then here's really the one that blows me away. He listened. For the next 7 verses, Jesus doesn't say a word. He lets them talk. How often are we just waiting for someone to stop talking so we can talk? That we're not really listening. I asked you a question, but I just want to know that so I can say the next thing I want to say. But Jesus asked them questions and then he doesn't say a word. We can all listen. We can all care. We can all ask questions. We can all listen. But this is the best part. The best part is in that Jesus spoke from the scriptures. Now, Jesus is the author of the scriptures. But what does he do? It says that he went to the law and the prophets and spoke to them all the things concerning himself. Jesus could have said whatever he wanted to, but he didn't even use his own words in that moment. He used words that they were familiar with. He used the scriptures. When we meet someone, we don't have to have some great speech. We don't have to be an excellent orator or a great teacher to share the scriptures with somebody. You share the scriptures. God has given us everything that we need to share with someone to convert them to Christ. I don't have to come up with anything. He's already given me the script. I just have to share it. I have to care enough. I have to see them and know that they need it. And the result was this: their hearts burned. And then what did they do? They ran back to where people were and they shared. You see how that works? Every Sunday is Bring a Friend to Church Day. Every Sunday. Bring someone who is a good candidate for the gospel, because everybody you meet is a good candidate. We have to have eyes that truly see and not just look at people, but understand that everybody needs this. Everybody needs to hear this truth. And this is the greatest example given to us by Jesus himself. And so everybody here can be an evangelist. If you can show love, if you can be compassionate, if you can be hospitable and non-judgmental, you can see and not just look. And you can absolutely evangelize. And the goodness of God makes itself known. The 5 evangelists in my life had no idea what they were doing for me collectively, yet God did. The Mountain View Church was just being the Mountain View Church, and Brownlee Reeves was just being Brownlee Reeves, and my wife was just being my wife. And yet, collectively, God used it. And so if the statistics are correct, then at least half the people you meet every day are like me back then or something like it. And just like I answered those young campers when they said, "Why did you wait so long to become a Christian?" Nobody invited me, so what should we be doing? We should be inviting people. That's it for my time this morning. I hope that I've given you something to begin the thought process of where we're going this week on and what it looks like. How important the work of the church here is and what it is as Christians that we should do. Everybody here has an opportunity to serve in some way. And so I hope that I'll give you some things to think about this week that'll push you in that direction and that we'll all leave here better for it. Thank you so much for your attention.